my theory of the parenting prison. This was rooted in my observation more than any contrived theory. It was just really kind of me thinking through my own parenting experience, my parents' parenting experience, rooted in observation. I watched the cycle. I watched how parents parent the way they were parented often. They repeat the same discipline or the same interaction because that's what they knew growing up. So really, anytime there's a conflict, when there's a parenting conflict, parents end up trapped in a limited set of options. My go-to response is, I yell. My go-to response is, I get flustered. My go-to response is, I cave in. My go-to response is, I argue. Whatever that looks like, and there's lots of different ways that can emerge, but it's typically surrounding a conflict situation. You just end up trapped, and you end up thinking, I don't know that this is the right way, but this is what I do because it's what I know. And really, there's this really interesting cycle of you don't know that you don't know. So you're operating in this limited set of options, but you don't know that there's any alternative. And so until you're introduced to the alternative, you can't do anything differently. And let me share a couple of, that was the dichotomy. Let me share a couple of examples. I had a mom that I worked with, came from a very large, I think she was one of like 7 or 8 kids, very large Greek family. And she had she had 3 boys, but I worked with the oldest one who was 5 at the time. He was an extremely sensitive, gentle, quiet, loving, really sensitive kid. And she was, like I said, one of 7 or 8 kids, but I think all of them were brothers. I think she might have been the only sister, or maybe there was only one other sister. So she was used to roughhousing and yelling, and they're Greek, so they're loud, and she just overwhelmed him. I mean, and it was like, but she didn't even know she was doing it. I mean, I would watch them, and he'd come out, and it was what I perceived as like yelling, but that was just her talking. I mean, she didn't know that she was yelling, and I was like, holy cow, this lady is so loud. And like the kid would kind of just, he kind of always had this deer in headlights look with her, and I thought, she just doesn't know. And so in one of the consultations, I said, I wonder if you ever feel like you yell a lot. And she was like, no, like, I mean, I don't really. And I thought, oh, okay, well, so let's kind of talk through this a little bit. And what was fascinating to me is as soon as I said, I know you're not actually yelling, but I think your son perceives you as yelling. When I watched that click for her, she's like, oh my gosh, like that's my family. Like we are loud and we yell over each other, but we're not upset. We have to talk over each other because all of us are talking at once. And it really kind of resonated with her. Oh my gosh, I just didn't know that that's what was going on. And as soon as she got it, it changed the entire relationship because she'd be more gentle and be more soft and be more quiet. And he got that better. So, and that was just one of those like, hey, I just need to show you there's another way. Can you go from 10 to 6 on the scale? I mean, that's really not a big shift. And it was a big shift for her. But I mean, she just kind of embraced the idea of I need to be more Now, her middle son, oh man, he'd yell with her and they were happy together. But the oldest one just really needed her to kind of be a little more quiet and soft. So another example, my own father actually, like I said, he was physically abused. Now, interestingly, this is the converse situation. He was physically abused, and actually up until he was 14, she called it the glass strap, and it was basically like this clear plastic belt, and she would go get it off the fridge, and she would beat them, and she'd make the other siblings watch them get beaten. I mean, it was horrific. So until he was 14, and the day he turned 14, she was ready to hit him, and he grabbed her hand, and he said, if you ever hit me again, I'm going to hit you back. And that broke that cycle. But up until he was 14, I mean, a 14-year-old kid, you don't get spankings anymore at 14, So anyway, he made a commitment at some point, when I was born, when my brother was born, I don't know when, he would never ever hit one of us. Now in his case, it was, I'm trapped in a limited set of options because I'm going on the complete opposite end of the spectrum. So he never disciplined us at all. My mom was a disciplinarian because he was avoiding the cycle of abuse. But he was also equally trapped because he didn't know any other way to be either. It's either I'm going to hit you or I'm not going to hit you, but there's no in between. And so, I mean, I remember literally I was the good kid, in quotes, because every kid is good. But like, my brother was kind of the push boundaries, test, like kind of, you know, see how far I can go. And I was like the follow the rules. Like I'm the people pleaser kid. So I never pushed that, but I mean, I could have done anything with my dad, anything. And he would be like, stop. And that was as far as the discipline went with him. But equally as trapped. And of course, you know, later in life, when I was an adult, married and whatever, I was like, you know, I want you to know that it means a lot to me that you never hit us. And of course, he got upset, and it was like our little moment together. But that was a choice that he made, but then it limited what he was able to do as a dad too, because he didn't have any other choices either. So parenting prison, definitely something that I think it's helpful to be aware of, even when we don't particularly know that we're in it. But I think this, being here this weekend, this equips you to get out of it, even if you didn't know that you were in it, if that makes sense. So before I move on, any thoughts or questions on that?